Om Shanti. Good evening. Welcome to Interview with a Raj Yogi. And our topic this evening is the spiritual significance of timing, part 2. But as usual, we're going to start with a little reflection. We live in a world at this time where we like everything to happen yesterday. Where we want so much to control how and when things unfold. And that mostly applies to things outside. When we come into the spiritual study, we also try to force, when things unfold, expectations of ourselves or others. The spiritual practice is all about cultivating respect. Respect of the self, and therefore respect of others, and respect for all treasures of the physical world, including time. Begins with that first respect of the self. And so I go inside to what I know is the seed of respect for self. Experiencing myself to be a soul, not this body, not any of the physical things I have, not the roles or relationships, and not even those subtle forms of status or value. I become just a point, completely self-sufficient, free. And in that moment, I become calm, peaceful, content. No pull to force anything. Just content. Om Shanti. Om Shanti. And welcome to Interview with Raj Yogi. And if you just joined, tonight is part 2 of the spiritual significance of timing. It's a lovely reflection. I must have caught the thought beforehand because I was thinking about, in terms of this day-to-day life, about timing
But before I was going to ask something about that, I was going to first maybe back things up a bit about why is timing such an important thing? And I think you brought it up in the reflection.
In spirituality, there's actually two aspects of our life that we refer to as our greatest treasures. One is time, and the other is thought. These are really the two things and they are so connected, so connected. But so we can see that they over and over again come up as issues, as blessings when we are very spiritually, I suppose, developed, and as a curse when we are forgetting ourselves and it seems like ego and attachment and fear are kind of running the show. They become a curse. So people feel an incredible pressure of time or fear of time. And they also feel like their thoughts are not in their control. And so both of these treasures kind of run amok once we kind of lose that spirituality in our lives. So both of them are very interesting to watch as markers of spiritual development, but also spiritual, if you will, atrophy.
It's interesting when it was mentioned in the commentary about expectations for others, and it feels like it's connected then to a topic that we often touch upon briefly about the law of karma, consequences.
Mm.
Do you feel timing in that sense, in terms of maybe we're not doing things, at appropriate times, can lead to consequences that we don't realize, but we're so focused and pushing for certain things to happen?
Mm-hmm. I was remembering a lot leading up to this session of an incident where I had traveled to, I think it was Boston by plane. And when I arrived at the airport and I was being received by the BK family there at the airport. And so we were just, getting to pick up the luggage. And I think everyone has experienced this at least once in their life where the luggage is not there on the carousel and it's fairly clear that it's somewhere else. And it's perhaps we use the word lost. It's not lost, it's just somewhere else. And so I filled out the claim, and so I had nothing. This was before we had to pack everything in our carry-on before, if you will, 9/11. So we would, travel very lightly on the flight. And so I really had nothing there. And they were lovely. They let me, they loaned me at the center there what they could. And I remember the next morning, the idea was that I would, be able to greet the family and at least have proper clothing, but I had nothing other than the travel clothing. And, it was so interesting because the airline had reassured us that, but you don't know where it is or what's going on. But there was a point, I remember getting ready, doing my morning preparations, shower, etc. And I have no clothes to change into. And I remember there came a point was like, I just felt so at peace with it. I said, it's fine. Whatever happens is fine. There's just this deep surrender, this deep, deep surrender, just enjoying not what was lacking, but really a surrender that enabled me to enjoy and almost be entertained. And I remember at that moment, I literally was stepping out of the shower, having no clothes, and there was a knock on the door and it says, Sister, your luggage has arrived. And it literally just arrived just when we needed it. So, but at that point, I didn't care. I really didn't care. And so when it's very interesting when we try to force and control and even this idea of using yoga to force and control, we actually are, setting something in motion that in the short term might look successful. But as we learn so much in the study, what's going on in the long term? What have I really created? we had a beautiful class on the weekend about this idea of the seed, the tree, and the fruit. And if we're not careful with the seed and the energies around the seed, our intention, our attitude, our consciousness, it might create a tree, short term result, but there will be no fruit. So there's no long term result. So when we force, we live in a very fast world. Even the situation people want the restrictions to be over, they're totally losing an opportunity. And so, yes, short term, it kind of is a very interesting feeling, this race. We keep talking about a race against this, a race against that. And we never get to stop and think about, but what seeds am I planting right now? We might have short term results, but what have I done for the long term? That's, I think, what's a concern. And we know when we go back a bit in time, even if we take a profession of craftsman, the carpenter who, yes, there wasn't a product a minute going on, but the care that they put from inception to completion. And we always say they don't make things the way they used to. They would just last and last and last. It's that different energy around creating things, which is what the law of karma is all about. So it can make a difference.
I hope this question is not redundant, but when you're talking about there's long-term consequences, two parts to the question. What does that mean in terms of one's life? And what does that mean sort of on a global level? So more looking at, then the bigger picture of these consequences.
Well, yeah, I think it is really the same because the global is dependent on the individual. So if we look at the individual, we'll get a sense of the global too. But in terms of one's life, they're going to develop all sorts of physical ailments because the stress levels are going to be so high from trying to make so much happen. The idea of totally, we talk about quality of life, and we say that we were most spiritually developed in the past, actually, that we haven't been evolving. But this idea that when one is spiritually developed, every moment is sacred. Every moment is very deliberate, very careful, very wise. And so that my life actually has quality because from the inside out, because of the care. And this is a question that came up the other day, this idea of resignation versus resilience, and really asking souls to look at quality of life. Is my quality of life dependent on temporal things? And that's connected to time, things that come and go, things that could be taken away. Is that what might, so that I'm just racing to acquire these temporary things and basing my quality of life on that? Or is my quality of life based on more permanent internal or intrinsic things that cannot be taken away? So there's no race to acquire. I have these things intrinsically within the self. So at every moment, I'm just bringing, there's so much care. And so quality of life is now coming from inside. It makes a huge difference because I'm racing, to acquire things that will leave me at some time. So it's a really strange setup in one's life that I'm stressed out and then I'm disappointed. It's basically, I'm stressed in trying to acquire and then disappointed because the things I acquire will leave me. There's a very beautiful documentary I saw, and it talked about, because these very unique times we're in, again, some are seeing it from almost a victim place, a victim of time, what we're going through at this time. When will it end? As if they're just waiting out a sentence for when it ends, and not using the opportunities of the moment to innovate and discover and reflect. But some are. And one was saying, what are the things that really matter in life? They said, it was very beautiful how they described it. And they were absolutely right. They said, because they were a very high profile business person and they walked away from it all. They said, it was a form of violence, was the word they used. This chasing after the bottom line, this profit, it was a form of violence. And they suddenly became sensitive to that violence, trying to pack so much external attainment into a certain amount of time. It's a form of violence. It's very desire driven. And they said, I had to stop and look at what really matters. And they realized it's very little that really matters. It shouldn't be that we're kind of enslaved to time. There's very little that matters. And am I taking care of that?
Ironically, it seems like
Mm.
one needs to be in the right timing to actually care. And I guess in a way I asked that question because sounds like I don't care right now. This is just what I want, and
Yeah.
and it's not their time to be receptive. But about the whole global one too, I don't know how obvious perhaps it is. For when we talk about that and we share about that in the Raja Yoga course, what does that person and what's happening to them has anything to do with me,
Mm.
right?
Mm.
And I know that we oftentimes are in our own little silos of how, and we can't see the ripple effect of things.
Yeah. Another term that time refers to is eras. What is the call of the time? What phase are we moving into? We talked about relay last week and these different legs. And I think we're definitely, it's our own creation. We raced into globalization in order to benefit the self. But there is a beautiful blessing in global, and it's an interconnectivity that could serve us well. But are we using it just to pit ourselves against each other, or are we using it to unite? Because that is the call of this time. This time is crying out for unity, that we don't run around trying to blame each other. The call of the time. What is the timing at this point? And it's saying if we do not hang together, then we will definitely fall apart. So this is, it does, it's again, it's each one's, we use the word fortune, each one's timing as to whether they'll realize that. And again, it's connected to what really matters. Is it that I prove myself right and you wrong? Or is that together we find a solution? What really matters? And I am hearing more and more cries for unity to work together. This is very sweet, and I don't want to get. I'm not interested in getting political about anything. But when I hear a leader, it's very beautiful. Say, I don't want to blame anyone for anything. If people want to blame me, that's fine. But I don't want to. I want to work together. I think that's he's identified the need of the time, and I'm hearing this, and it's wonderful because this is the time to do that.
In terms of timing, what is it do you feel that enables one? There's a timing piece, but what is one feeling where they start to feel like, I need to start to pause more, listen more? What is the call of the time for myself and others? What is that pull? Is there a certain feeling or
Yeah,
and
we
why?
yeah, we look at the life of Brahma Baba, and I think it reveals so much about timing. We have a soul who has everything, and yet he reached a point, we call it the age of retirement, but he reached a point in his life where that what is it? He started to develop something called disinterest, and that is the turning point. That's the turning point where one's reflections will start to change. Until a soul starts to develop that, there's really nothing you can do. You can surround them with signals that maybe at some point but there has to be that happening inside, that disinterest. Now, when we say disinterest, it's not that they don't care. It actually means that they're starting to care. I know we've joked about that wonderful saying that one student said one day, caring about things I really don't care about. We want to care about things that I do care about. That's called disinterest. Um, so, out of habit or addiction, we start to care about things we don't really care about. What that looks like is I'm thinking about things that I really wish I could stop thinking about, basically.
That could be
Um,
a T-shirt.
yeah. But when I start to reflect on these questions of what really matters, what am I doing? Why am I racing around? This is what signs that disinterest, that I have become saturated. My time has arrived when I've been saturated by the effects of external validation, externalized. I'm just done. I'm done. I'm ready to return, to come and reconnect with the self. I'm ready to check into what really matters, what I really do care about, what really is important to myself and humanity. I'm ready. So that disinterest is a sign. And I know the word is a very funny word. I always compare it. I like the translation, which is more accurate, which is distaste, in the sense that, I might be eating a food that I'm very addicted to. It's not really healthy for the body, but I just keep eating it. And then there's one day when I suddenly have no taste for it. It's doing nothing for me. It used to be so enjoyable, and now it's doing nothing for me. So that's a sign that I'm ready to shift. So,
I know it's quite inevitable that the topic is going to overlap with the next topic next week, which is about, I believe it's using time in a worthwhile way.
mm,
But I
mhm,
think you talked about it in the commentary, or maybe you already
yeah.
introduced it, but about, um, again, back to this, whether it's against others or yourself, you're just trying to push the bottom line again.
Mhm,
In terms of considering myself to be a soul, could you bridge that gap in terms of how, because basically I think everyone does value timing because they'll notice sometimes maybe themselves or others around, well, that wasn't appropriate to say that at that time. Maybe it's
mhm,
right, or things need to change, or whatever the case is, or make decisions and being able to, it's all very connected. So,
mhm,
the experience and the practice of the awareness of being a soul, how does that help me in terms of that sensitivity to time,
mhm.
um, and just what impact you can have when you can start to do that in an accurate way?
So the the exploration of that question is about connecting a few dots. The thing that makes one sensitive to appropriate or accurate or relative timing, that is choices. So we're not talking about time in terms of minutes, hours, or seconds here. We're talking about choices when we say this kind of timing. The capacity within the soul that makes me sensitive to that in an accurate or appropriate way, or even an elevated way, is something called the intellect, that can see very clearly what is or not. It doesn't think its way. It can just feel that this is not the right thing to do right now, or this is what I need. So it's the intellect. So the question is how to get to that compass, or that clock of the intellect working properly. The intellect, of course, is within me, the soul. So we can't spot fix. Yeah, once we fix the soul, all my capacities sort of work better too. So the intellect is within me. So how can I get myself in a healthier place, me, the soul, such that my intellect also improves? And so this is where the practice of soul consciousness, because what destroyed the intellect is something called desire. And desire, so we say desire blinds us, blinded by desire. So I don't see anymore anything properly. Desire increases as the sense of self worth decreases. So when I go into soul consciousness, I get an injection of self respect. And so now I'm starting to address the thing that really compromised my intellect. I'm going into this beautiful experience of the self. And we say, I am feeling peaceful. In fact, today, this beautiful quote that to remain calm is a sign of higher intelligence, or there's a highest form of intelligence. That this freedom from desire, this peaceful state, which happens in soul consciousness, because I'm no longer looking for external validation, if you will, that happens when I think I am physical. So I have this sense of calm or peace, and it really fixes me up, and my intellect benefits. And then of course, we start to talk about yoga with Supreme Soul as a soul, etc. But it's all helping my intellect to improve. And if my intellect improves, if it can see better, then my choices will be different. My timing will be different.
I'm not sure if that's really a phrase that's in English, or maybe just thinking about in the course itself, the study, but there's, I think, something I honestly can't remember about dancing in the rain. There's storms that come. You dance through it. I'm not paraphrasing it properly, but it's about being able to flow with things.
Mm.
It's just when you're sharing, I was thinking about if there would then be more inner harmony and an outer harmony, because you have the sensitivity of what's appropriate, what is not, and it's not, again, sort of a textbook appropriateness. It's more about something on a more deeper level, that it's about the law of karma again,
Mm-hmm.
but which seems like a fine line, because you could probably want to try to do things because you're trying to fulfill certain desires too,
Yeah.
but it seems to be something deeper, a harmony with on an internal level that's fulfilling because of experiencing myself to be a soul. There's other ramifications when I'm, basically making decisions from an empty tank.
Yeah, we're told over and over again in this study that desire is what's mucking up our lives. So this experience of soul consciousness and where it leads me is really liberating me from the very thing internally that's throwing a wrench in my life. And if we look at timing and desires, again, we want things to happen in a certain way at a certain time. And so our timing, our choices is directed by that. If I could become free from that kind of drive, then my timing, my choices would be very different. And therefore, the karmas, the results would be different. So, how to free the soul? It's very interesting. It's like, I want this. I don't know. As an example, I want these. Just today, that souls want these restrictions to end now. They want this now. They want this now, and they're tired. And it's some, I think, are reflecting, and it's very interesting. Those who feel this, they can't say it out loud, because people will look at them almost as a traitor. But there are a handful of souls who say, I've actually, and it's not just people who are sitting in meditation, just people who said, actually, I've experienced a lot of benefit at this time. They're not tired. They've really experienced a lot of change and growth and self understanding. And I'm not talking just about spiritual students, it's just some people were able to become free from I want, and it opened up this opportunity such that, we say, with however life unfolds, which is also timing, they're able to say, there's some benefit in this scene. But we won't feel that if our desires are saying, but I want this to happen. And this idea of only if this happens is there benefit. Only if what I want happens is there benefit, which is really how we often do things. So if the soul can become sort of internally content, complete, the idea of yoga is I now, because I'm connecting to the Supreme Soul, I have a different source of attainment. So I'm not trying to seek it out through certain outcomes, situations, results, relationships. I have a different source where I'm getting my stuff from, which is God. So now that I am fulfilled from an independent source, I'm going to approach things very differently.
It feels like there's a ripple effect that sometimes we don't appreciate, that to focus on just the experience of who I really am and how that affects all these different capacities. I know you were talking about, that sensitivity of what feels right, the intellect. And just, with you being in the study for nearly 30 years, have you noticed in terms of your relationship with time and timing, and those who are very senior in study, what ripple effect that has created?
It's really interesting to, I won't say myself, I think it's more interesting to look at the leaders in the organization, the senior sisters and brothers. It's very interesting to watch them because, they always look so, we call them easy yogis. They always look at ease. They're dealing with huge decisions. Um, you know, it's a large organization. Many lives are involved with the students, and they always look so at ease, which I always kind of appreciated. In fact, I remember so many times hearing the story. Earlier in my life that they someone might go to one of the seniors and say, this is happening, and we need a decision now. We need it now. We need a decision now. This is do or die. And the senior would look at them and say, "Come back tomorrow." Like, no, 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 you don't understand. I need a decision now. I say, I understand. Come back tomorrow because before tomorrow comes, they'll have evening meditation. And so they're like, okay. And so they go into evening meditation. Of course, at that, during meditation, everything changes inside. So, there's just they have such a beautiful mastery of timing, such a beautiful mastery of timing. And even when things happen so called suddenly, there's just such a beautiful spiritual stage that there's never a sense of they react. They never become a slave to time. They don't react. They always respond. Even to suddenly, they respond, and so I think that's really inspiring to see. They also, again, have such a complete relationship with God that they're not going to do anything without checking in with that soul. Doesn't matter how much you force them. And they try to inspire us to do the same. And it's true. We often feel, oh, this has to happen yesterday. Sometimes people get a little bit upset with me. There's probably a few upset with me right now, um, because they want things at a certain time. And I have actually, I think everyone's gotten used to it. They often are quite shocked if they can get me on the phone or anything because I don't travel around with my device, my phone. I don't. And um, I'm just, I don't know why. I'm just, and social, but you should have it all the time. You've got responsibilities, and it's like, well, sometimes I'm at work or, meditating or anyway. So, but one thing I've noticed is that, I might look at it, glance at, and see a whole bunch of this long conversation back and forth with different souls. And then I go away for a while. I come back and it's resolved. I didn't have to get involved at all. So I just sometimes, I think we underestimate the power of good wishes, pure feelings, these subtle powers, which we're told now are very important. In Once someone said, to be patient is a decision. To have a meditation is a decision. To, request more time is a decision. That this sort of reactivity again, the force of desire and ego and attachment, this pushing. It's a violence, actually. It is. I agree with that. It feels like a violence. Um, and so it's not a shirking of responsibility. To teach the self to respond can never be a shirking of response. Just because I don't react doesn't mean I'm irresponsible. I think there's a lot of responsibility, so I want to take the time to actually respond. I remember once someone sent me an email, and I could tell in the email they were quite upset and frustrated with me. And yes, I could write back with trying to explain to them or so called defend myself. And I actually even started to compose an email. And then I sort of sat and literally connected to God. It's like, I don't think this should be like in terms of karma, what that thinking now, what it would have set in motion. Like, I don't think we need to. What we need is to really just pour good wishes into the relationship, just flood the relationship with so much love, just that feeling. So it actually is sitting in my draft folder, unsent. Um, if we react, um, we just can make such a mess. This is where regret comes from. I wish I hadn't. If I could go back and do it again, I would do it in a different way. But what if we learn to respond? And that does sometimes mean, and while I'm learning to slow things down, once we've learned, as we see with the seniors, they can make decisions very quickly. But while I'm learning, I might need to slow things down.
I feel that could be a whole new, another big topic, which I know that we're basically out of time,
Yeah.
but about the power to be able to choose to,
Mm.
step back to, okay, maybe I need some time. It
Mm.
feels like I think disinterest is a huge part of it
It's
too.
disinterest and it's self respect.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Hmm. Wow. Well, I think that we have run out of time. So we will have our little reflection now.
It's very beautiful the way spirituality unfolds, how it operates. And so we often use the image of a tree to capture the dynamics of spirituality. It all depends on the seed, the supporting roots or values, what emerges, and then the long term results, the fruit. It all depends on the seed and the care of the seed. Some say it's a waste of time to shower so much attention on something that's invisible that you can't even see. But to give a lot of care to the seed means everything, the roots, the trunk, the fruit, will all be successful. It's not a waste of time. May not look like there are results at first, but for those who love the journey towards success, they will give that time to the seed. And the seed is, what state am I in when I'm faced with a choice, a scene, a situation? Check inside. What state am I in? Before I even think about what's going on, checking my own state. Am I in a spiritual state? Am I in my highest potential? Am I in a peaceful state of mind? That moment of checking can make a world of difference. Om Shanti.
Om Shanti. Well, thank you for those who joined with us this evening. Next week's topic, again, two parts to it, is using time in a worthwhile way, but it does feel like it's all very connected. So, Judy, I'm going to pass it back to you. What sessions are coming up? It's always a pop quiz.
Totally is. Things are coming. Maybe they're on the website. We'll continue in April with these Tuesday night interviews. Drop in meditation for the public will continue on Tuesdays, Thursdays, a full hour on Sunday. We still have self-care with the young adults. Saturdays 4 to 5 on our YouTube channel. And we have Inner Fitness on our Zoom platform on Saturdays from 2 to 3. And the topic coming up, which was requested, was about being, we're calling it coachable and yet confident. So this idea of moving from ego to self-respect. I believe there is definitely a Hindi full Raj Yoga course. That's details are on the website. But is there also some English? Those are coming. Those will be posted on the website as soon as they're confirmed. So check there or email us. Thank you for joining this session. Om Shanti.